Hey, what's going on, bike people of the internet? I would like to introduce a new permanent member to my retro collection. It is a 1994, possibly, Cannondale Killer V 900. Some people say it's 93 because this actual bike appeared in an episode of Seinfeld. Interesting fact for you there, and that was a 93 episode, so I don't quite know how it works. Maybe it's because bike companies release their bikes year ahead and call it a model year. Anyhow, this is the bike. It's quick fly around here next to this cool graffiti, if it will focus. It's all quite original, like drivetrain and frame and components. Like tyres aren't particularly good. I've been upgraded to some knobbly nicks, and it's got this strange Bonte saddle here. But overall, I picked it up for just under £200, and yeah, it's quite expensive for what it is, I think. But it's what I wanted, and it's not in terrible condition. It rides quite good. Only issues is the shifting's a bit sticky, so I need to inspect that. And yeah, the frame's a bit tatty with some sort of marks and scars, but it's a 30-year-old bicycle pretty much. So yeah, there we go. I'm going to take it back to my garage and start this teardown. Unlike some of my recent builds which have been resto mods, I want to keep this as original as I can because it's in really good condition. So let's start up here. The Alex shifter has a broken window here, so I'm going to look out for a new shifter or window or parts at least. This side is in much better condition. There's a slight wear on it. These Boki Prayer Sticks Pedros grips are kind of cool, I think, so I'm going to actually try to retain those. They're very old school looking and I want to keep them. It's got some weird spacers here on the headset. They look a bit too big for it, and they are made of steel, so maybe this is a potential opportunity to add some lightweight ones there. They look a bit weird, they're a little bit too fat for the stem, so maybe they're designed for an aluminium stem. The brakes aren't functioning perfectly well. These sort of, I think they're called plus 40 systems, these little cam snails don't work well on Cannondales. I mean, they work well, but not great. And the bolts are a bit rusty, so we need to de-rust those. There's some wear points there. I don't know what to do about that. Ideally, I would like to touch it up, but I think it could end up looking worse. So I think it's okay for the bike to be patinaed from 30 years away. It's got a really nice sort of faded Cannondale hub here. I'm not sure what colour this would have been originally. Maybe it was blue, maybe it was grey, maybe it is that colour. But it looks pretty neat, so yeah, I'm happy to keep that on the bike. And these Ritchie Rock 440 rims, they're adequate for what I need. But the knobbly nicks are a bit too modern for the bike, so I'm going to look at getting something different there. Looking at the down tube, there's some battle scars down here, and I bet that was from a pedal from another bike. It's a bit dusty and dirty, but that's okay. Overall, the paint's in decent condition. It's got scratches and patina, but I'm okay with that. It's a 30-year-old bike, and generally the condition looks great, especially with this sort of, I think it's cobalt blue to liquid silver or something like that is the Cannondale catalogue name. This Bontrager saddle needs to go. It's not a bad saddle per se, but it looks way too modern for the bike. And it's a Trek saddle on a Cannondale bike, so that's kind of making my skin crawl. It's got a nice original anodized blue quick release lever there. Yeah, handmade in USA, classic Cannondale. Not super keen on that bottle cage as well, so I'm going to lose that. What I do want to retain is this crankset and definitely the chain rings. The anodized blue chain rings look great. These Walgo pedals are welcome to stay, I think. It's got like a self-extracting this side, but on the other side it's not self-extracting, so it's definitely been mucked around with in the past. Dior Alex front shifter, nice, in good condition. We have an XT 8-speed at the back, although it's a 7-speed bike. Keep that, it's in good condition. Again, we got the anodized blue brakes. Dior Alex rear hub as well, so yeah, this rear wheel's going to stay. It's all good, just need to de-rust those bolts on the brakes and get them functioning perfectly. But yeah, overall it's just a very light teardown, and make sure everything's sound, rebuild it, replace a few components and get going again, and yeah, make it nice. So I always recommend checking a chain on the bike. It's a good indicator of how hard or not the bike's been used. So this failed at the 0.5 stretch but passed at the 0.75, so it is like the cassette is reusable, but the chain's in the bad condition, so that's definitely going to go in the bin. It's quite dirty and manky looking as well. It's like a heavy, I bet that's muck off winter lube on there. That stuff's terrible. Yeah, so yeah, new chain, and I'm going to treat it to a new cassette as well to make it all shiny and new, because 7-speed cassettes are pretty affordable. So let's start the breakdown of the bike. We're going to split the chain, pull it through the drivetrain and put it in the bin. I've actually already bought a chain for this bike. It was from Chain Reaction and it cost $3.99, so yeah, just bin worn chains. Moving on to the pedals next, and yep, they come off easy for a change. Last couple of bikes I've worked on, they've been a bit of a fight. Some things have happened since then on another build I'm working on currently. It definitely was a fight, but these ones were installed properly with adequate grease, so yeah, they came off nicely, and we can 100% reuse those because I think they're like perfect for the bike build. So moving on to the chain set next, and something strange was going on here. I thought this was a self-extracting crank bolt, but when I put some force into it, it felt like the cap of the self-extracting crank bolt was bending. So I paused, I took the pressure off, didn't put too much on, but it didn't feel right. So if in doubt, stop and assess the situation. So yeah, I needed a quick look at this and make sure it wasn't a plastic cap or something strange. So I just poked a little screwdriver in here, because these are like screwdriver shaped things, to make sure it wasn't a plastic cap. So yeah, I can't pry it out with a little bit of force. And then I was like, oh, is it plastic or is it like aluminium or steel? And what I think it is actually sort of a blackened steel. So I just tried scratching the edge here to get some confidence that it was a metallic thing. I'm not going to reuse this, so I didn't mind damaging it, but I didn't want to damage the threads in the crank because I do want to reuse those. So yeah, after assessing it and realizing it was an actual self-extracting crank bolt, what I decided to do is spray some WD-40 down these little openings here to reduce the friction between the head of the bolt and the self-extracting cap. So I think that's what's probably causing it. It's a little bit tight and it's not great, and I just wanted to make sure that the friction was reduced, so when the bolt pulls against the cap, it's not just fighting friction between the two, it's extracting the actual chain set. So yeah, a light spray of WD-40 all around, just blasting it actually, to be honest. Get a load of lube in there and reduce the friction between the bolt and the extracting cap head, and eventually the chain sets come off. And this is what the dirty side looks like. I always take the chain set off because I want to give it a good scrub, and the best way to do it is to remove it. So yeah, as you can see, the chainring's really dirty on that side because they're hard to access and clean. Moving on to the non-drive side, as you can see, no self-extracting here, we just have a cap over it, which was interesting. So I think this bike has been rebuilt at some point in time. Actually, interestingly, in the studio pictures, the crankset is black on this bike, so maybe there were some changes going on at one point in time. And here's an example of a top tip for you. Always check for a washer inside your crankset before putting the extraction tool on it. As you can see, there's a big washer in it. I couldn't see any square taper, which is the usual sign. So always check see if there's a washer. Next, I want to remove the bottom bracket, but as all bikes I've experienced recently, it's incredibly tight in there. So I'm not going to force it at this stage. I've not had any luck with bottom brackets recently, and I've developed some techniques to remove them, and I will go into that now. So the first thing to do is put your bike on the floor. It takes the strain off the seat post and or the frame where you clamp it in the stand, and you get better leverage on the bottom bracket. So first thing, put the bike on the floor. Is it still not moving? It's not in my case. I know it's tempting, but don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. What we're going to use is a heat gun to expand the aluminium, which expands faster than the steel of the bottom bracket. So we need to cut the cables off, funnily enough, as we don't want to heat up the little plastic cable guide under the bottom bracket because it's likely to melt. So yeah, chop the cables, and then you can remove the plastic cable guide underneath. So yeah, I'm going to use a heat gun to heat the area. It doesn't need to be a heat gun. You could probably do this with a hairdryer as well if you have one. I don't have a hairdryer, I've got short hair. Just use a heat gun, move it around the area on low to medium heat. You don't want to be heating up the paint to sort of make it bubble. You kind of just want to warm up the general area over a decent period of time. I'd say do it for a good 2, 3, 4 minutes and test the area with the sort of back of your fingers to make sure it's not overheating. You should be able to kind of tap it and touch it like an oven tray hot, maybe a little bit less than that. Yeah, not super hot. We just need to get the area warmed up so the metals expand at different rates. It should free off the bottom bracket. And with everything heated up nicely, it breaks away nice and easily and free, just like that. Simple, really. It's the best way to do it. There's a little time lapse of me doing it. And what bottom bracket do we have inside? It's generally looks like lightly rusty, but yeah, a UM51, nothing special, but nothing too bad. The bearings run smooth, so we actually probably reuse this one. No reason to change. And with the pressure from the other side removed and the heat, the non-drive side comes out super easy, so no problems there either. Let's have a quick look inside, shall we? Let's check out the condition inside the bottom bracket shell, and it all looks pretty good. There's just some rust dust needing cleaning up there from removing of the bottom bracket. A little cleaning here later and it should be all good. Let's remove the wheels from the bike next. I kept them on in case we needed to put the bike on the floor to remove the bottom bracket, and we did. So yeah, now the bottom bracket is out, we can remove the wheels. Let's remove the rear derailleur next. I'm going to reuse this. It's a super classy, good condition, 8-speed Dual XT. So yeah, definitely would like to reuse that. We'll just give it a reconditioning. And it's got some nice cable ferrules there. Bottle cage next, that can go. Saddles going to the spare parts pile. Moving on to the grips next, and I actually want to retain these grips to reuse them, so I need to be very careful removing them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a blunt end of a little modelling paintbrush, and I'm going to use some hairspray to sort of lubricate under the grip. I'm going to work it around and hopefully the grip should slide off with zero damage. These grips feel pretty delicate and pretty thin, so yeah, being very careful here to get them off. And with a bit of working around and being gentle, they come off with no problem at all. You'd want to use something like hairspray or isopropyl alcohol under the grip, something that evaporates away. If you use WD-40 or GT85, some spray lubricants, they'll just spin around forever when you stick them onto the bike. So yeah, use something evaporating. Next, let's remove the brake levers and shifters. They're combined units on this bike, so it makes it easier. It's just one bolt to undo, but we've got to remove the cables, brake cables and gear cables and all the flapping around. I like to retain the cables as a cutting guide for new cables until I've done, and sort of make sure there's no proprietary bits hiding within the system. Yeah, so I always retain the cables until I rebuilt the bike. Yep, so here we go. Yep, the brake levers are coming off with no problem at all. Next we remove the cantilever brakes, and I make a mistake here and I snap the plastic shroud around the spring. Not the end of the world, but God, I was annoyed at myself for doing this one. What's happening is these brakes aren't normal. I should have double checked them, and there's no pin that goes into the hole on the fork effectively. They're just held there in friction, so how you control spring weight. So what I needed to do is use a pedal spanner just to hold the back end of the brake still whilst I undo the bolts. So yeah, frustrating mistake there, but yeah, let's be honest, that's how these things happen if you don't know how they work fully. This is the first time for me removing this type of Cannondale brake. Yeah, and I made a mistake, so hands up, I'm not perfect. Hopefully if you watch this video and strip down a Cannondale, you can learn from my mistakes. Next, let's remove the bar and stem, and there are fortunately no dramas here after the brakes. It was just all very smooth and went to plan. I was actually quite interested to remove the stem itself because it's got like an interesting mechanism of how it sort of clamps to the fork steerer. So yeah, I was curious of how this works, and it's kind of like an expanding wedge that flexes the steel inside, which is pretty neat I think actually. So yeah, well done to the vintage Cannondale designers. You come up with a cool looking system with no extra bits and bobs on it. So yeah, it's a really neat design I think. With all the controls moved, we can remove the forks and check out the condition of the headset, and you know what? It's not a disaster. It's kind of a little bit dry in there, but there's some grease, there's no signs of rust, so yeah, we're going to try to reuse this one for sure. Just needs extra grease in my opinion, so we'll reuse that. And for some reason I couldn't remove the lower bearing. There's a little seal in the way it needs picking out, so I just gently pried that out, and again it's in decent condition, and we will reuse this headset, I'm 100% sure. So here's the stripped down bike. I gave it a quick clean off before I filmed this bit to sort of see what the state of the paint's in. It's a little bit scratched and tarnished, so we can definitely do something with that, which we will do in the next episode. We'll sort of prep the paint and parts of the bike. Yeah, overall I'm fairly happy. There's a lot of like scratches and stuff on the bottom there, and you also may have noticed I've left the front derailleur on. I thought the front derailleur was shifting really well. It was very clean and I didn't want to see the marring under the seat post, so I actually left it in position. I didn't remove it from the bike, so not a full strip down. But yeah, here's what it looks like. In the next episode we're going to give it a good clean down and try to work on the luster of the paint. Maybe we'll remove that chainstay protector because it looks nasty. Yeah, so this is the overall condition at the end of the day, and yeah, next video we'll do some cleaning, paint preparation, and start thinking about the part prep for the rebuild. So I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching if you got this far. I know it's quite a boring video for some people, other people might find it interesting, but it's what I enjoy at the moment. I'm just enjoying the sort of retro bikes, and I think it's a really good way to get into biking at the moment. I think bike prices are pretty insane for mediocre bikes that perform fair to medium. And I think for value for money you could spend like £200 on a classic road bike or mountain bike and have just as much fun. Okay, you might want a proper trail weapon if you're going to the bike park, but if you're just poodling around locally, I think a classic bike is way better at this point in time, value for money wise at least. Thanks for watching, I'll see you in the next video, and yeah, cheers.